future has come.
That it is 2:20 in the afternoon, and you've also had some food. So, in a second I will ask you to stand up and copy what I'm going to do now, just to wake us up a little more, because I'm conscious that being an Agbalagba or Yivo, there is the chance that as the time goes on, I may hear snoring before I finish. I can promise, as God is my judge, I will finish in exactly 1 hour from now. If I finish before, hallelujah, but no more than 1 hour, I promise, because I know many of you have many miles and long distances and time through Lagos traffic to go where you want to go. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do this. Just watch. You're going to stand up and starting with your right. Oh, wait. When I tell you, you will stand up and with your right hand and shouting as loud as you can, you will go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You will then use your left hand. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is where it gets difficult. Your right leg. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then your left leg. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 2. 2, 2. 1, 1. Okay, got it? Loud. I will face this way so I can't see you. Okay. Are we ready? Let's have you standing now. Okay. Ready? Go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 1. I've done that in everything from a PTA meeting through to a school hall with 450 primary age children. This is who I am. This is where I work. I've lived and worked in Nigeria for nearly 6 years. And before coming to this noble establishment, I was headmaster of Lagos Preparatory School in Ikoyi. We're on a journey, all of us, whether you are old, like me, and I've been in education for almost 33 years, or whether you're young, like all of you, I can see quite clearly. We are on a journey. If I were to ask you, hands up if you are a leader, I wonder how many hands would go up. Would it just be the head teachers? Would it be heads of departments? Who would it be? Let me tell you without any shadow of a doubt, every single one of you is a leader. In your job, in your profession, you are leaders. Where two people are involved and a dialogue is taking place, one person at any one time must be leading that conversation. So you're starting off here. I praise you for the fact that you've given up a Saturday. Teaching is a demanding job, 5 days a week, and that's just with the children. Never mind preparation, marking, planning, and so on and so forth. So well done for giving up your Saturday. It's not easy. Be warned, as my predecessing colleague was telling you as well, what I'm going to say in 1 hour can be the basis of an entire conference of 4 or 5 days. It can be the basis of a term's continual professional development. So I'm whipping through this very quickly. I've got one handout for you, which is at the back, double sides. You can take one each, that encapsulates what I'm saying. But we're rushing this, and by God's grace and a lot of hard work, COPAD will organise more functions like this as we roll ahead, and hopefully you and other colleagues can also come to that function. Okay. Let me start with Every Child Matters, which is pretty much summing up this, isn't it? No child left behind is the tagline of COPAD. Every Child Matters then is implicit in that. Every Child Matters was born in 2000. And I don't know if you know why or how, but like a lot of major initiatives, it came out of a lot of grief and a lot of sorrow. In 1999, a 7-year-old girl by the name of Victoria Climbié came from the Ivory Coast with her auntie to London. The main reason was for the auntie to start a new life, start a new job, claim free housing, and she brought the young child with her as a motivator. With her partner, her husband, in the space of 12 months, the child was battered, abused, sexually, physically, mentally, and after just 1 year in the United Kingdom, the child passed away at the age of 8.5. The British social services, the British police, the British medical profession, the British schools all failed in monitoring what was going on with that dear little girl. And she passed away at the age of 8.5 and was in such a bad state when she went to the hospital she could not be revived. There was a major inquiry chaired by a member of the House of Lords in London, and as a consequence of that, Every Child Matters in school was born. So as sad as it is, if you want to look up the history of it, you can go on to, I think it's something like vcf.com, VictoriaClimbiaFoundation.com, and it gives you a bit more about the work of the foundation that is now working for underprivileged children, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. They're building a school, they have built a school in Victoria's honour, I think somewhere in the poorer areas of the Ivory Coast. So that's why I'm enthusiastic about it. And my two schools, where I was headmaster in England, were both Every Child Matters schools. We passed the inspection and we were ECM in our style. Next slide, please. There's lots of slides. This is interesting. I'm going very quickly. In 2000, some research work was undertaken by an organisation based at the University of Nottingham in the West Midlands, and they asked a number of Year 8 children, so 12, 13-year-old children, what they thought were the characteristics of a good teacher. I've said good classroom practitioners because we know we work with assistant teachers and so on. But what do they class as the good qualities of a good classroom? And look at them. I'm hoping, by God's grace, that none of you will find these shocking, that none of you will be surprised by them, and I'm hoping that within your heart of hearts, you can identify some, or maybe all of these, in yourself or in your colleagues. Okay? What I would do if we were here for much longer would not be to show these. It would be ask you to list what you think are the top 5 qualities of a good teacher. But we're moving forward, okay? Because we will be finishing by about 3:15, okay? But there's nothing there that I hope shocks and surprises you. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that we are on a journey. We are on a journey together. I'm not Nigerian, but I have a stake in Nigeria. 6 years worth, and by God's grace, I have at least another 5 years to go, which is the length of my contract with Grange Education as their chief exec. And I'm passionate. I'm not standing here on my Saturday when I can be with my 5-year-old or 10-year-old back in Ikoyi simply because of all the money I'm getting paid, because it's nothing, is it? I'm here because I want to be. I work with both Lagos State and Osun State in developing their practices and policy around education. And I'm hoping you're on this same journey with me. You may have a difficulty in going back to your school to convince your head teachers or your colleagues, but believe you me, it is a journey. We were children. We need to enjoy being children. We need to have fun in learning. We need to make a positive contribution, whether it's to our school, to our family, to our society, to Nigeria, to West Africa, and so on. We need to achieve economic well-being. The children that you're teaching, whether they like it or not, even where, if you are quite out of Lagos, in what might be described as socially very difficult areas, they still must achieve economic well-being. We have 70 million people, don't we, in Nigeria, who live on $2 a day, who do not achieve this. Your children, almost all of my children, are Nigerians, but they will not, as time goes by, simply be isolated in Nigeria. Even if your children do not travel overseas in their holidays, as almost all of mine do, even if your children don't, they still see things on TV. They still have iPads. Right, staying safe, simple, being protected from harm and neglect, being healthy, enjoying a good physical and mental health, making a positive contribution, being involved in the community, society, not engaging in antisocial behaviour, economic well-being, not being prevented by economic disadvantage, and lastly, getting the most out of life. Next slide. Okay. Moving very quickly. I can assure you that we could spend 1 hour on each of these 8 matters, but I'll leave these because I'm going to come up with them later on. Continue. Continue. Okay. Children were assessed in the UK about their views of Every Child Matters. What do you think would your children say if you asked them this question? Do they feel safe in school? Do you enjoy your learning? Do you think you will make any economic contribution to Nigeria or where you live? Is this school healthy? You know what kind of answers your children would give. Next slide. Okay. And here are some of the questions. If you ask your children, you could elicit some kind of answer from them. How safe do you feel? Do you or other pupils ever experience bullying? If so, how do... Every school has bullying in. This is probably the oldest and the most prestigious British school in Nigeria. We still have bullying. It's not about whether there is bullying, it's about how you deal with the bullying. Do you know who to go to in school if you have any concerns? Does the school promote healthy eating? I was just been talking to my friend and colleague Kitan at the back about the appalling record that Nigeria has in terms of physical fitness. No medals in the Olympics. Ironically, medals in the Paralympics. And some cynical people say that was only because they spent 6 weeks in the States before the team went to the actual facilities. The football team is doing very well at the moment, all things considered. But in terms of grassroots football, grassroots rugby, cricket, shocking. Okay? Things have got to improve. And so it goes on. These are questions that are associated with those 5 outcomes. Next slide. Okay. In 1993, and I can remember it as though it were yesterday rather than 21 years ago, I was head of a department. I'm an economist by degree. And I thought that economics and the teaching of economics was the most important thing. Forget everything else, I was an economist. And so my children did well in their O-levels, they did well in their A-levels, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then, like a road to Damascus experience, I had an enlightenment, an epiphany. And it was through a dialogue with a co-colleague of mine who was a psychologist, an educational psychologist. And at the end of the conversation, I went home and I thought, and I couldn't believe the revelation that I had in my mind. And I'm going to tell you now, and it's simple, and you might think, why did it take this silly old man this long? But you think about it. The revelation was this, that no matter how good I am at economics, no matter how fantastic and fascinating a pedagogue I am with these children, making each one or only some of those things, you will never, never reach the optimum of your potential, irrespective of how fantastic a teacher I am. Do you understand? Yes. It was simple, but I'd been teaching almost 15 years. And then after that, my career changed. It went like that. I was not just focused on academia, I was focused on pastoral. So I was no longer head of department, I was head of year 9. I was head of senior school. I was deputy head in a special school. I was headmaster of a special school. My whole philosophy changed. Now, that said, since then I've had a smaller epiphany. If you can have big epiphanies and little epiphanies. This is another revelation. And it's simply this. If you are doing your job in the way that you should, you must always be aspiring to this. You must always be aspiring to this. Anybody that goes into a classroom on a Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, and just turns up and is prepared to deliver average, it's not going to work. Okay? Jesus, when he changed water into wine, didn't change still water into sparkling water. He didn't change still water into still water that was flavored with some kind of fruit. No, it was water into wine. It wasn't mediocrity. It wasn't halfway. It wasn't a little bit of a miracle. There's no such thing as a little miracle and a big miracle. Outstanding is outstanding is outstanding. What does it mean? It means if I had got all 60 of you to stand in a line like this, and then one person Did that? Leaving the rest behind. Mediocrity is left behind. One person stands out. Simple. So, as important as making sure your child is happy, this is important, and they go hand in hand. You cannot have an outstanding lesson if all those issues under Every Child Matters are not pertaining. Okay, next slide. Right. Most of this I have on a handout for you, so don't please be distracted writing this down. But all this simply does, and this is where our colleague touched on it before, these features, 10 I think, are all to do with facets of an outstanding lesson. If you were being inspected by me or one of my colleagues from London, and any one or more of these was in short supply, it wouldn't be an outstanding lesson. So, there must be differentiation. We've heard about that. Either differentiation by task or by outcome. So what you're giving the kids is different to all 20 or 10 or 40. Or you're giving them the same, but the way that you mark it is different. Does that make sense? Yes. So, if you had 3 children here, okay, one who's, God bless her, a little bit slow, finds learning hard. This girl here is kind of somewhere in the middle, and this boy here, gosh, he's a bright boy. If I'm giving them exactly the same task, that is fine. But I'm marking it and assessing it, as our colleague said, in a different way. Or I'm giving them different activities. If I'm getting them to practice a skill in mathematics, and there are 40 questions, and any mathematicians in here? Any maths teachers? Well, that's interesting. Okay, no math teachers. But you know, when you get maths exercises, the first 1 or 2 are easy, aren't they? And then when you get to number 40, you're thinking, oh, la. Now, if I've got 40 and I want them to practice, I'm not going to give him questions 1 to 20. I'm not going to give her questions 21 to 40. Why bother to get him to do the first 20 questions when I know he can do them in his sleep? One of the phrases I want you to start learning and taking back to your schools is this. And I think you mentioned it, Mom, and that is learning and teaching. Not teaching and learning. So if we focus on learning and teaching, the next step is more learning, less teaching. That is one of the phrases which is coming out of the best practice at the moment. More learning, less teaching. Now I know for teachers that's hard, and forgive me if I'm being very bold, I think for Nigerian teachers that's probably even harder than most, because Nigerians are great talkers. So when we have training sessions at this school, it's not always me who's leading them. When I want something done, I might be standing at the back. If you know your naughty children sit at the back, do you go and stand at the back to do your teaching? Or do you always stay at the front? Teachers are not preachers, present company accepted. Teachers are not preachers. Preachers are up here delivering a message in general terms, and that's rightly so. That is not what teaching's about. It is not what teaching is about. Next slide. Now, this is interesting. And forgive me, the white on the blue usually only works if it's a very dark room, so forgive me. On here, I've got good practice. Teacher as all-knowing oracle. So, let's say this boy does very well, he goes on, and unusually for a Nigerian boy, he doesn't want to be a barrister, a doctor, or a banker. He actually wants to be a teacher. So let's pretend he's a teacher, and he's a good teacher. He knows his subject inside out. What's your subject, sir? What do you teach? English language, fantastic. So he's an English language specialist, whether it be on sentence construction, verbs, adverbs, creative writing, he's brilliant. If, however, he is preaching here, standing 6 feet above contradiction, I'm not looking at you on purpose, I'm joking. If he's here, he can only ever be classed as good. However, if the teacher is an organizer and but just one source of information, he's going to be outstanding. Learning is teacher-centered, didactic with carefully guided activities to support learning. I fear, and you can correct me otherwise, this is what goes on in most Nigerian schools. It is teaching to the test. It is imparting knowledge. It is not about inquiry-based learning and understanding. So, I can go through all the rest. They basically say something similar. Learning is an active process if it's going to be outstanding. Effective learning arises from open-ended, challenging, problem-solving exercises. When my school was inspected in Lagos, in Ikoyi, back in 2011, we had some inspectors come from England. Because of the Nigerian culture, the school was penalised. And I'll tell you why, and it's classically Nigerian, because I know that you are all beautifully helpful people, and that when somebody is struggling, you want to go and help. Am I right? Yeah. When I was trying to carry my 3 bags up the 3 flights of stairs, which is a lot for me, for the Agbalagba, when I got to the top, all my staff are there. Ah, Principal Graham, let me take your bag off. You're that kind of people. Am I right? Yes. Yes. Okay. Now, it mitigates against performance sometimes. You have to believe me, it mitigates against performance. If a child is struggling, to try to resist the urge to always help them yourself. You might say, well, it depends on the type of struggle the child has got. They can't understand the word. They can't read the writing. I appreciate all of that. But can the child next to them help? If you've got a low ability girl next to a high ability boy, why do they need me to say, oh, come on, what's wrong with getting him to do it? In England, they call them elbow partners. So when you sit your children together, and I know that many of you will have them in individual desks in rows, try and do away with some of that some of the time. Put a bright child next to a less able child. Put a middle ability child next to a bright child. The interaction between those children. Okay? There are lots and lots of strategies that would take days to go over, and we can produce materials. We have a system now in this school where we only acknowledge and praise good behavior. We try never to say a negative word if we can help it. So, instead of this little sweetie here putting her hand up saying, Ma, I don't understand. All she does, forgive me if you mentioned it, I missed the start of your presentation, we produced traffic light colours for the children. So each child, as they come into class, will collect a little pack of a red, a green, and a yellow colour. So if this child is finding it difficult, she doesn't have to put her hand up and admit in front of her 30 or 40 or 50 colleagues that she's struggling. All she does, she just turns over the card that's red. And because I'm not the kind of teacher who always stands out the front, which is what I'm doing now, of course, but I'm the kind of teacher who's going round and looking at the work. Oh, that's beautiful writing. Well done. You've come on a lot, haven't you, since last week? Well done. Oh, love the shirt, by the way. You know, if you're going around engaging in children and being nice to them, I'll have noticed that she's got a red, and I won't go, ha, she's got a red. How stupid is that girl? I'll be walking round, everybody else is getting on with their work, nice and busy, meaningful, and I'll be here, and I'll be like this. So, we're having a discussion, that's assuming that she hasn't got help from him. Because this smarty pants here has got a green, hasn't he? So he's got a green. Now, if there's a red, if there's a green, if there's an amber, we act accordingly. So if he's got a green, what am I going to do? At some point, in terms of assessment of learning, as you heard earlier, I'm going to pick on him, aren't I? But in a nice way. What's your first name? Godwin. Godwin. Okay. So I'm going to say to Godwin, don't do it now, it's okay. Okay, Godwin, brilliant. You're doing okay. And I will ask him a question. And that question will be partly to assess him, but the answer will be to help the other children. So I'm only one source of information. I know some of your schools are not terribly wealthy, so you haven't all got computers and the internet. There are lots of other ways, I know. But please, if you can, resist the temptation to be... Okay. Forgive me if you've heard, have many of you heard of Bloom's taxonomy? It's a way of questioning children and building up their knowledge. This down here is the lowest level of understanding. And I fear, with respect, that these two levels here are what prevail most of the time in most Nigerian schools. That's been my experience. I'm happy to be persuaded otherwise. And that is purely being able to recall knowledge. So you're teaching them to do a test. They do the test and they know the answer. However, if I were to try and go into more detail with them as to why that's the answer, to start unpicking why it's the answer, to get you 3 or 4 to have a conversation amongst yourselves as to why that's the answer, there will be silence. So this level of Bloom's taxonomy for thinking is about simply recalling information. As you get higher up the pyramid, you're using, wow, much bigger skills. And I would say that part of the problem with Nigerian society in terms of our leaders, and we know what we mean by our leaders, is that they've been used to a model which exists around this level. So this is about basic understanding, okay? This one here is about applying the knowledge. This one is about analyzing the knowledge. This one is synthesis, is about taking knowledge and being able to use it in different ways. And the top one, and this is the hardest for all of us, is about being able to evaluate the knowledge. Let me give you an example. Next slide. Okay, this one looks at some of the language that you would use. Because you are good at language and because you like talking, let's try and get it right then by the questions that we're asking children to do. So, let's start at the bottom, which is simply knowledge. So, the ability to retell or describe information. For words like that, you would simply have show, tell, count, state, simple exercises. As you move up to evaluation, to reflect on what has been processed and judge or verify its merit. Scientists are often very good at getting the difference. Yeah? You know, you put copper sulfate into water, what happens? It turns blue. And so that's here. Okay? Maybe why does it turn blue? Might be here. And you see the point. I'm going to show you an example in a minute. So look at the words up here. Imagine using these words. And don't think we only use these words with children who are 13, 14, 15, 16. These words can be used with younger children, and you can use different words to mean these words. So, appraise, argue, choose, critique, defend, estimate, predict. Can you see the difference in the type of words to try and get our children to learn? Next slide. So, an example. All students will know the parts of the male and female reproductive system. Oh yes, of course, we know they'll know that. That's level 4. Most students will understand how fertilization and pregnancy happen. Level 6, some students will be able to explain what happens from conception to birth and also be able to explain what happens as we grow up and become adults. You can see the different levels because of your questioning. Next one. Okay. Strategies for outstanding teaching. For you then, first of all, teachers have high expectations and ability to motivate pupils. Teachers set challenging tasks. Teachers carefully assess pupils' progress, supporting the needs of pupils, including those with SCN, and the effective teaching of reading and skills. Next one. Pupils. Are your pupils highly engaged? And by that, I do not mean they're simply staring at you, listening and writing or dictating or copying from the board everything that you've given them. Do they move from listening to be positively motivated? You've heard about chunking lessons. You've heard about, theorists tell us that the average child's attention span is their age plus 2. So if you're working with JSS 1 children, you're looking at an attention span of about 13 or 14 minutes before they drift off. If you're working with an 18-year-old, you've got 20 minutes talking to them or doing one activity before you should be changing what they do. I'm not practicing what I'm preaching. You appreciate it because I'm trying to get through all this in 1 hour. Okay? Do they learn and make progress? And we've got our assessment as part of that practice. We should be able to judge that. Do they obviously enjoy the lesson and have fun? And are they keen to discuss what they have learned and what they might be doing? The best teacher and the worst teacher I've ever worked with is the same person. I can talk about him now because he's at least 4,000 miles away in London. He's a guy called Phil Smith, who I employed at my last school in England, and he was a history teacher. When he was at his worst, he would, and this is with children who were special needs. My experience in England is dealing with delinquent boys and girls. Yes, the kind of boys and girls who've been excluded from schools twice, the kind of boys and girls who wanted to hit me simply because I was the headmaster. So you can imagine how we had to try and engage them, not just ordinary well-behaved kids. His worst lesson would be page 56, read it, copy it. That's his worst lesson. Let's say it was about the Battle of the Somme, one of the World War I worst battles, where hundreds of thousands of men died in 1916. His best lesson was this. I'll show you now. If I break the tape, it doesn't matter because it's one of mine. His best lesson was this. He'd say, right kids, get everything off your desks and put them like this. And get down on your knees, as low as you can, and look over the top and pretend you've got a machine gun. And imagine hundreds of men running towards you and you're going to have to kill them. Which lesson was the best? Which lesson did the kids enjoy most? This one. This one. The information on page 56 was exactly what I've done now, except you can appreciate the difference. It is hard, and I would respectfully say for Nigerian teachers, it is harder to let go than the average British teacher. Just hear what I'm saying about letting go, about not realizing you're up here talking down, but you're there cooperating with. We've had some training in this school 2 weeks ago on this with my teachers to really kickstart things. I had children in my office yesterday saying, Principal Graham, there's something going on, isn't there? We're doing so much more group work. Teachers are listening to us more. We're spending less time being spoken at and rather collaborative with. Next one. Pupils. Do the pupils ask appropriate and challenging questions? If they do, how do you deal with it? If they're not asking challenging questions, why? You're not challenging them. The work is too easy. The work is too boring. The work is unexciting. Your star needs changing. If this is not happening, the inspector will know that it's not because of the kids, it's almost certainly because of you. If they answer challenging questions, how do you answer them? I used to teach A-level economics, as I told you, in England. They used to ask me questions I didn't know the answer to. You may have experienced it. I have. I've taught children. There are children in my school now who are cleverer than me. All right, they haven't been to university yet, but at their age, 15 and 16, they were cleverer than I ever was. Don't be ashamed of it. You have strategies. I remember one boy asking me a particular question about inflation. And I had no idea what the answer was. So I simply said, Godwin, good question. As it happens, we're doing that tomorrow. And by tomorrow, I'd gone home, looked in the textbook, looked on the internet, and sure enough, I could answer is, we've got to be common sense. When I first met my 450 children I've got in primary, I reassured them that the best that we can do at my school, and I hope the same as yours, is that wherever they're at, whether they're low ability, middle ability, or very clever, wherever they're at, my job is to make sure that they reach the extent of their potential, and if possible, go beyond. And I reassured them that when I was 9, 10, and 11, I used to get my report for my mummy, and in my class there were 44 children. And it had my position in class as a fraction, something over 44. I was never higher than 38th. So they know that their principal, that their chief exec, when he was a primary child, never got higher than 38th place out of 44. There's always hope for our children. And it took an inspiring teacher called Mr. Lloyd at the age of 14 who kick-started me and, by God's grace, helped me get where I am today. Next one. We're flagging. We need to push on. Okay. 6 steps to a fantastic lesson. Some of this is on a sheet, don't worry. If you want to write it, you can do, but it is on a piece of paper at the back. 6 steps to a fantastic lesson in 12 minutes. 1, be in control right from the start. Okay, that doesn't mean shouting. Being in control does not mean shouting. We're not impersonating LASMA and police officers. Being in control does not mean, you know, you've been there, I've been there, happy days. So, setting up the learning environment. If you could try this, just try it with some of your classes on Monday morning. Students should expect to start something as soon as they come into the classroom without you even directing. This strategy should cover the time it takes for all the students to arrive. It neatly shows that you are completely and effortlessly in control and makes a great impression on an extra visitor. One of my former colleagues in my last school used to write the date in a certain way. So today, she would have written 18-1-2014. And the children knew that as soon as they started to arrive, put their bags down, sit down, or change from one lesson to another lesson in the same room, they had to be doing something with that number. I'll give you some examples in a minute. Get the students into the habit of doing this. So your being in control isn't right. Come in. Shh, shh, shh. Sit. What are you doing? It isn't that. It might be sometimes, but it isn't always that. Try and have something on the board. And as soon as they come in, they see it and they're thinking. Right. Whilst the students are completing this task, smile. Greet them individually by name and make them feel welcome. You could get the students to assess each other's work if appropriate. Also, and this is really testing you, and I appreciate it may not be difficult, but research has shown that certain types of music played at certain times has a calming effect and can stimulate learning. Moving on. Yeah? Step 2, the starter. The starter should stimulate curiosity and open-mindedness and prepare the brain for learning. This is one of the phrases coming out of England at the moment. There's really no such word until somebody thought of it. A starter can be a thunk. A thunk is a curiosity or a challenge. What is a thunk? It's a question that has no right or wrong answer, but it makes you think. This prepares a student to be open-minded, which is the top of Bloom's taxonomy triangle, not the bottom. Let's see one. Where does the sky begin? What has the most freedom, an ant or a school child? Is the person who has a face transplant still the same person? Which is heavier, an inflated or deflated balloon? Our scientists here could probably give me an answer to the last one. But you take my point. So, okay. A box which they have to guess the contents of, a wig or a hat, someone can try and guess the character, a messenger. There are lots of different things you can do. Just try it. It may be an absolute disaster the first time, the second time, the third time, but believe you me, if it's linked with other things, it will start to show, next one, it will start to show that you value what they're thinking. I presume, I'm hoping you do this, that you should, near the start, be telling them exactly what the lesson's going to be about and exactly what the outcome's going to be. Good morning, children. Fantastic. Well done for those few ideas. Now, what we're going to continue today is to help ensure that. If you want to be really outstanding, you can actually tell them what part of the lesson is going to be, and you can then say, what do you think we should do to help with the second part of the lesson? Exactly. And sometimes it's difficult to judge where children are in understanding. So what we've trialled in certain situations is to have a line in the classroom. There could be a mark on the wall here and a mark on the wall here. Let's say that Godwin for the last 2 weeks has been flogging them to death with adverbs. What's an adverb? Define an adverb. How can you use an adverb? Give me some examples of adverbs. And 2 weeks of it. So now on this wall, we've got our adverb line. This end is for everybody who's an adverb genius. This end is isn't. So you're getting your children to say, okay, come up one at a time and stand where you think you are in terms of your knowledge of adverbs. What's going to happen? Well, he's probably going to have the majority of people like our young lady here who's average. She's going to be somewhere in the middle. And then you're going to have people up here and people down there. People down here you give additional work to, and da-da-da-da-da. This person up here, you might say, right, you 2 or 3, go and sit down and work with these 2, and so on and so on and so forth. An easy way to get the children to think where they are. Most children underplay themselves. Yeah, next one. Step 4, the 3 C's. What are the 3 C's that must be present in lessons? The main lesson activity. This is where the teacher's input really comes in. So this is your chance. This is you've done the thunk, you've done the introduction, where are you before we move on. This is the meat in the sandwich. This is the core of the lesson, okay? There must be 3 C's. Challenging. Challenging. Do not deliver your lesson with respect to the lowest common denominator. We're challenging children to think and move up. Collaborative learning. This is crucial, as students should be able to work on task without adult supervision. You've got bright children here. It is possible that our least able child can come out with some wonderful stuff, whether it's because she's least able or young. I've got a 5-year-old, Rafe. When he was 4, he was on an iPad. I think he was showing me how to use it. He's 4. And while he was there, he suddenly said, do you know, Daddy, tomorrow is today. And it didn't strike me as being anything kind of fundamental, and it probably wouldn't have been anything fundamental for him. But if you think about it, when we're talking about ICT, tomorrow's today, isn't it? Our lives, their lives are so different from yours. You must make them as different and better from yours as possible. My biggest passion as an educator is that whatever I did, whatever I achieved, whatever I found difficult will become easier, whatever I found fantastic will become even better. I am a teacher because I had some bad teachers at school. And at the age of 18, when deciding whether to be a barrister or a teacher, you know what route I obviously took. Wouldn't it be great if, because of you, your kids wanted to become teachers because you are outstanding teachers? Okay. And finally, after challenging, collaborative, there must be a choice of activities or approaches for them. Use higher order questions. If I've given work out, all things being equal, this boy here is going to finish 10 minutes ahead of this girl and maybe 15 minutes ahead of this girl. What am I going to do with him? I'm not just going to leave him sitting there. At the very least, I'm going to ask him if he'd like to be very kind enough and come and give a hand to this girl here. At the very least, I'm giving him some higher order questions to be doing. While you're here, just think about that paragraph there and see if you can analyse that. I'm not having him sitting listening or just sitting doing nothing while the rest of the children are working. Next. So the first 3 points, choice, collaboration and challenge, need to be present in order to deliver an outstanding lesson. Challenge, because this is the way to ensure that expectations are high and making progress. Collaboration, because students should be talking more than teachers and working together to achieve brilliant outcomes. And choice, because it engages the learners and makes them feel committed. It's important there's choice. We heard that we know there are at least 3 learning styles: visual, auditory, kinesthetic. We know that the day after you've spoken to them, they will have forgotten 20%. 2 days after, they'll have forgotten 30%. Within a week, they'll have forgotten 90%, unless they're active and it's being reinforced. Next. Step 5, dish up the dirt. Dedicated improvement and reflection time. Next one, I'll come on to that in a minute. Next one. Okay. This, I would say, is the hardest and most important part of your lesson. It is towards the end, or it's the conclusion, because it will tie together what you hope they've learned with what they will learn. And if you evaluate something, you have to start to understand something. So it's near the top of that triangle. Essentially, you want to know, as a consequence of you being in that room with them, what are they leaving with through that door that they didn't have when they came in that door? Does that crystallize what I'm trying to say that you should be getting from this part of the lesson? Next slide. Okay, and there are different ways that you can do it. This one here is showing fingers. So if 5 means you've got everything and you're perfectly happy, you're showing you're doing this to teacher at the end. The opposite would be this. Okay, and there are lots of different ways. Write newspaper headlines, summarizing what you've learned. Always make sure you finish on time. So you must do your, never talk, 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 bell, close books, go. Bad lesson. Leave time. The conclusion is crucial. Okay? Finish the lesson by setting the scene for the next exciting learning experience. So if he's finished doing adverbs, he might say to the children, right, next week's lesson, I want you in the last 1 minute to be telling me what you think we should be doing. Some of what they come out with will be inappropriate, but there will be some that you will follow up. You've got to show that it is a partnership, that outstanding teaching and learning and teaching is a partnership. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Right, I've got this on handout, okay? If you have to take anything away with you, the 7 secrets of great teaching. Building confidence in your learners. Ability to make difficult decisions. Developing others. You must be good communicators. Non-conformists. I know most of you will have been taught when you were in school in a certain way. Your school now will be teaching most of the time in a certain way. Somebody has to break the mold. Somebody has to break tradition. Nigeria, 15 years ago, was a nation with potential. Nigeria today is a nation with potential. What's wrong? It's still potential. At some point, it's got to be realized. I'm so passionate about this. Our newspapers today, with just 15 months before the election, are talking about corruption, politics, what needs to be done. What isn't happening is what should be done. You as a teacher cannot spend your time just talking at them. These children that you must produce to make this a great nation must be inquiring learners. They must not simply accept, they must challenge. Economists have identified 4 developing nations that by 2015 will be amongst the leading nations of the world. And yes, Nigeria is one of those 4. They're called the MINT countries. Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. Next. Here we go. I've got this written down for you as well. An outstanding lesson includes, I won't go over it because it's written down for you. Quite clear. You will never, in a day, a week, or a month, be able to do this. It's a long game. I started off my presentation by talking about a journey. You, by being here, at the very least, have started that journey. You have taken the first step. When you go back to school, you might have to take 0.999 of a step backwards. But by God's grace and perseverance, there is movement forward. Unless you move forward, next slide, your children will not move forward. Thank you for listening. 3:15. I'm happy to take any mind-blowing, forgive me, it was rushed. There's a simple 2-sided handout you can take. I'm hoping that we organise more of these, and I'm hoping that I'm brought back, and whether I like it or not, we'll slow down and we'll practice and do work on a number of these things. Any questions? I know it's a long day and you want to go home. It's a bit like asking a turkey if it wants to vote yes for Christmas. I know it's a non-starter really, but are there any questions that you want to ask of me? One of the things that we're developing, I think, Nikkei, is we're developing email addresses for ourselves, so that so rather than bombard my email address here, I will have a COPAD email address that we will send out to all of you. So if at any time any of you wish to ask a question or clarification at any time, just email me and I will promise a response easily within 48 hours. I can make that promise.